My first wedding anniversary. Everything fell apart. My mother-in-law stood up in front of everyone and accused me of stealing her expensive gold watch. My husband, Min, silenced the room and demanded that I return it immediately. Angrily, I yelled, "How dare you accuse me of such a thing?" But before I could say more, he slapped me hard across the face and called the police. I was dragged away in handcuffs as they mocked my humiliation. But they never anticipated what would happen next, because the next day, I returned with a surprise that would shake their world to its core. I am Thursday Hung, and this is the story of how my life took an unexpected turn I never could have imagined. It all started 2 years ago when I married Min. I was 28, full of hope and deeply in love. Min, a 30-year-old banker, seemed like the perfect husband, caring, attentive, and ambitious. I inherited a beautiful house from my parents and thought that starting a new life with him in that house would be the beginning of a fairy tale. At first, everything was perfect. Min and I moved into the house initially with just the two of us. Then my mother-in-law, Alon, a wealthy and controlling woman, decided to temporarily move into the living room. She claimed it was to help us adjust to married life, but in hindsight, I realized this was the first step in her attempt to impose control over our lives. Long was not someone easily pleased. She had a way of making you feel inferior without raising her voice. Every time I made a decision, she found a way to criticize it, from the meals I cooked to the way I decorated the house to how I managed our finances. Thursday Hung, do you think the shade of green works for the living room? It looks childish, she would say with a sharp tone. Min would often laugh and tell me not to pay her too much attention, but those words cut into me like a knife. I tried to maintain harmony, hoping things would improve with time, but Lan's presence only made everything feel more suffocating. Every decision I made was questioned, and Min, disappointingly, rarely stood by me. "She just wants to help," he would say, brushing aside my concerns. I started to feel like an outsider in my own home. The first year of our marriage felt like a constant challenge. Every day, I had to walk on eggshells, careful with every step around Lon, who seemed determined to assert her authority. Min, with his weak personality, made everything worse. He was so easily influenced by his mother that I began to wonder if he even realized how unhappy I was. But I loved him and persisted, hoping things would change. Then came our first wedding anniversary, a day I thought would be a celebration of our love and resilience. Min and I decided to throw a large party at home, and of course, Lon was very involved in the planning. "Let me handle everything," she said with a smile that wasn't warm at all. I wanted the day to be special, so despite my reluctance, I let her take charge of the preparations. The party was wonderful, and Lon spared no expense. Guests filled the house, laughter and music filled the air, and there were plenty of congratulations for our 1-year milestone. I almost forgot about Lan's presence, but then everything changed. At first, everything was lighthearted. Lan's cold smile became more noticeable as the night went on. She interacted with the guests, but her voice was loud enough for me to hear some of her conversations. "Thursday Hung is so lucky to have Min," she would say with a tone full of disdain. I tried to ignore it, reminding myself that this was my day, not hers. After dinner, Lon stood up and lightly tapped her glass to get everyone's attention. "I have something important to say," she declared in a cold voice, and the room went silent. I looked at Min, who looked just as surprised as I was. Lon raised her hand, showing a bare wrist with only a faint tan line where her gold watch had once been. "My gold watch is missing," she announced coldly. "My family heirloom is gone, and I believe, Thursday Hung, you were the last person near my room this morning." The entire room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. "Thursday Hung, do you know anything about this?" Lon continued, her voice frigid. I stood frozen. "No," I stammered. "I don't know anything about this. I didn't do anything." "Stop lying," she snapped, her face no longer polite. "You've always been jealous of my family's wealth. It's shameful." The room erupted into whispers, and the gazes of everyone in the room felt like walls closing in on me. I turned to Min, desperately looking for his support. "Min, you know I didn't do this." But he stood up instead, his face filled with anger and embarrassment. "Sophia, he said coldly. If you took it, return it right now. Don't make things worse. I didn't take anything, I cried, tears streaming down my face. How can you believe her, Min? Without another word, he slapped me hard in front of everyone. The room went completely silent as I collapsed to the ground, clutching my cheek. Enough, he shouted. Stop lying. I'm calling the police. Before I could process what was happening, the police arrived. Min accused me of theft, and even though I protested, they still handcuffed me and dragged me out of the house. The last image I saw before the door slammed shut was Min's cold expression and Lan's triumphant smile. In the police car, my tears blurred my vision, and a single thought consumed me. This was not the life I had envisioned. I had been betrayed by the man I loved and humiliated in front of everyone. But deep down, a spark of determination ignited. They had taken everything from me, my dignity, my home, my trust, but I would not let them win. This was only the beginning. I spent the entire night in an interrogation room, feeling utterly alone. The police questioned me for hours. They doubted me and didn't believe my innocence. Even though I insisted I was not guilty, they searched my purse as if the watch would magically appear there. Of course, they found nothing. The humiliation only deepened. In the end, I was released due to lack of evidence, but the damage was done. I stepped out of the police station late at night, exhausted and confused. I wanted to go home, but where was home now? My home had been taken over by Min and Lon, as if it had never belonged to me. I headed to a nearby hotel, my heart filled with fury. Why had I let them treat me like this? The sunlight streamed through the hotel window, but my mind remained dark. I woke up with an emptiness inside me, my body exhausted but my mind filled with chaotic thoughts. Everything around me was collapsing, and I had no idea where to begin. Ethan, the husband I had trusted, had turned his back on me. Margaret, my mother-in-law, whom I had tried so hard to please over the years, had stripped me of all my self-respect. They had crushed me, but I couldn't just let it end like this. I sat at the desk in the hotel room, trying to focus. Though I had no clear plan, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let it all end like this. I couldn't let them win. A thought flashed in my mind. If they want me to pay, I'll show them I'm not someone easily defeated. Opening closed doors. After leaving the hotel, I didn't return home. Instead, I decided to find a lawyer. I needed advice, a strategy, and most importantly, protection. I knew I couldn't just sit idly by and wait. I had to stand up for myself. When I walked into the lawyer's office, a middle-aged man named Fook greeted me. He listened as I recounted the events in detail, and the more he heard, the more surprised he became. This is a complicated case, Fook said after I finished my story. But I believe we can turn things around. Especially if Margaret has a history of controlling behavior. We can use that against her. Though I didn't understand all the legal intricacies, I felt a glimmer of hope. Fook told me that we needed to gather as much evidence as possible. Testimonies from people who attended the party, documents that could prove Margaret's controlling behavior in my life. That would be the first step. I left the office feeling slightly lighter. At least now I had a plan, but that was only the beginning. A new life. That day, I decided to move out of Ethan's house. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't live another day in that place, where I felt like I wasn't even myself anymore. I rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, where I could start fresh. Everything was new, and I hoped this would be the place where I would find my freedom again. The next day, I called some old friends, people I had lost touch with during the time I was living under Margaret's shadow. They were shocked when they heard about what had happened. "Lon, if you need us, we're here for you," they said. Their support gave me so much confidence. Planning revenge? Or real change? As time passed, I still couldn't forget what had happened. The feeling of betrayal haunted me. But I knew that in order to move forward, I had to find a way to overcome it. I couldn't keep living in anger and hatred. 1 month after the incident, I met with Fook again. He had gathered some important evidence. One of the party guests remembered that Margaret had hidden the gold watch in her room before the party started. This could prove that she hadn't lost the watch, but had intentionally staged the whole thing to blame me. We could also clarify that she had repeatedly exhibited controlling behavior in my life, and all of this could serve as grounds to demand a change in property ownership within the family. I started planning my counterattack, but rather than simply seeking revenge, I wanted to make them realize their mistake in treating me like a weak person. I was going to take my life back, but at the same time, I had to face one truth. Did I still want to be with Ethan? He had betrayed me, yet a part of me still loved him. However, I knew that if I went back to him, I would never be able to live a life that was free and happy. A new beginning. A few weeks later, I made my decision. I didn't need to restore what I had lost because I knew I could rebuild from the ground up. I wouldn't let people like Ethan and Margaret control my life anymore. I decided to take a long trip, to go to places I had never been, to meet people I had never thought about meeting. I wanted to rediscover myself. Before I left, I sent Ethan a divorce petition. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the only way to free myself from the prison his family had created. I also sent a short letter to Margaret, telling her I would never let her control my life again. When the door closed behind me, I didn't look back. Everything I had gone through had made me stronger, and I knew that, no matter how many challenges lay ahead, I would rise up because I deserved a life of freedom, free from anyone's control. My life was just beginning,